get into that domain, into that arena every day with focus, intention, and consistency, and then achieve eventually, and then grow so you can manage it effectively and recover from it.
I'm so excited to have our next guest, Kyle Shepard, Lieutenant Commander. Welcome on board, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, especially still being in the Navy and all. The things that we've been talking about prior to this meeting has been just insane to think about how many things you have on your plate. But again, I would expect nothing less of an officer. So it's really cool to have you, though. Do you mind just introducing yourself and giving a little bit of a backstory about you?
Well, like you said, we have a lot of overlapping interests. We'll be talking today about something I'm very passionate about that I teach in the military, which is resilience and stress management. But a little bit about myself. Again, Kyle Shepard. I've been in the Navy now for coming up on 12 years. Coming in as an audiologist primarily, which is a doctor of hearing and balance. So my job in the military, typically, I know you're a former Marine, Josh, so I manage hearing conservation programs. In the military, prevalence of hazardous noise is quite high. In the Marine Corps and Army, everyone is enrolled in this program because you're required to shoot on the range. In the Navy and the Air Force, most people are enrolled because of either weapons exposure, aircraft exposure, ship noise. Again, the prevalence of the stressor that is hazardous noise is high. And therefore, the number one injury in the military every year is noise-induced damage. So our goal is to identify the hazards where the risk is, intervene as early as possible with that management program where we're a pain in the butt, make you test your hearing every year. When we identify a potential problem, we intervene and make sure your protective gear is adequate for the environments that you operate in. So that is typically my job. I am at a command now where I do a lot of research, development, test, and evaluation of either existing or developing hearing protection and communication gear. So I'm not in clinic anymore. I'm not seeing patients, which I do love, but it's pretty cool to be on the proactive, preventive side when it comes to trying to develop capabilities to enhance the effectiveness of all the members of our military. But the reason we're talking today is 10 years ago at my first duty station, Camp Lejeune, in the military, as you know, it's very much promoted to grow outside of your specialty, to impact your command in various ways, even better your region, your branch of service, or the military as a whole. And so they encourage collateral duties or other opportunities to make an impact. And I learned of this program called Caregiver Occupational Stress Control, which was a component of the Combat Operational Stress Control Program, which was stood up in 2007 by the Marine Corps and Navy in response to just high levels of burnout and issues across the military due to the conflict. And so every branch was tasked with standing up some sort of a program to help manage the inevitable challenge that was long duration conflict, not only for our service members, but for their family members, for DoD civilians, and across the board. So I got into this program. Stress management has always been a passion of mine, impacts in my family growing up. And I've always just been curious also about why do some people respond so effectively to chaos, whereas others, same stressor, really struggle. And so that's been an interest of mine from personal experience, observing it, and then reading about it, of course, watching movies and everything else. So coming to this program, starting to learn about it, got pretty passionate about it, went to Naval Hospital Guam after that, and then became part of the leadership team. At that time, it was all psychologists and social workers or mental health professionals. So they were very excited that there was someone who was not a mental health professional, primarily like myself, being passionate about the topic that is stress management, because we tend to operate in a black and white world, or at least perceptually, either you're good to go or you need help. But as you know, most things are in the middle. Most things are gray. And like the hearing conservation program, early intervention is ideal when there's a problem. Prevention even better yet. I love the quote by Benjamin Franklin. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound in cure. And I love that for hearing conservation, and I love that for stress management, because while noise-induced damage is the number one injury in the military, about a 10% prevalence rate, everyone is impacted by stress. Again, how they function and recover from that stress and maintain, enhance, or are degraded performance from it, quite variable. And there are no really well documented injuries from stress until you get to that professional intervention is necessary. So I've become passionate as I got on that leadership team, started teaching it. And then now at my new command, where there isn't really a formal program, I've started collaborating with a few individuals, but really just on my own, starting to write about it more on Substack, I'm going on now safety stand down series for different commands, just talking about this in the same way you're passionate about how can we help individuals and find the gaps within all of our amazing resources to help people when they need it. But again, that intermediary period to encourage perceived support, to encourage resilience, to encourage effective management of inevitable stress and recovery from it. There's an opportunity in that middle, and I've become really passionate about that. So my long-winded answer is I've now become equally involved in stress management and resilience in the military as I am my primary job, which is auditory performance and hearing conservation.
What's really important about what you just said is one of a little story. I don't know if I mentioned to you last time we talked was what you just described being the thing that you do now, whether it's talking about stress management and prevention and all that. It's something that I would have wished that we would have had, and probably if we would have had an adequate amount of those, I guess I don't know if they're briefs, but classes, I guess, it would be. I don't know that we would have been. I would have been that motivated to have looked for another way. I think that's what had started my whole. That's what inspired my journey. Anyway, was just that I wish that there was more of our leadership saying, "Hey guys, we understand that we can't always ask you to operate at 100% if you got stuff going on and there's stuff in at home or things in your personal life, maybe even in your work life that are making it difficult for you to operate at a high level here." And so I think that that's a big deal, and it should be. I don't know if it's something that I would like for it to be a thing where it's just part of our regular work life, where at some point we have check-ins where we go, "Hey guys, just want to talk to you that it's okay to acknowledge these things," and just a reminder, because sometimes when we get into that flow of work, head in the grindstone, just get it done. When you do that enough times, it's very easy to forget about the stress side of it and the effects, the burnout that happens from just even working hard every day. So it's so valuable that you just said that that's something that you work on, and that's why I had to have a longer conversation with you about it, just because it's something that I'm passionate about as well. And so when we talk about stuff like passion, right? For you, you said that your passion, you developed it as you went and got into that role. But I imagine that there was probably something beforehand that was like, I would love to help people out in some sort of way. Or was it just something, have you always been inspired by helping people in this specific way, handling stress? Or was it just something that happened once you got into the job and you go, oh, this is what I want?
Yeah, great question. So more about my past. My sister is a social worker,
Hmm.
and she one of her tasks in her grad school in her program was to develop a family tree, and standard family tree. But then after she developed it, the goal was then to add in diagnosed mental health disorders, substance abuse problems, and other potential environmental factors that could affect functioning, and different colors for different classifications. And we both joked as we looked at it that her family tree ended up looking like a Christmas tree. It was lit up
Mm,
quite a bit. So
right.
a lot of exposure to various types of mental health disorders growing up, high rates of anxiety, definitely some other unfortunate cases with substance abuse and other
Mm,
things that we won't go into too much.
mhm.
But my exposure with that, I became pretty passionate at a young age of, yeah, eventually one day I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist. What I always tell young individuals, make sure you get out there and observe the jobs that you think you want to do. Once I started observing what psychiatry was, I knew very quickly I didn't want to do that. But I did end up majoring in psychology in school, and
Okay.
then speech and hearing science. It was actually working
Mm,
with children with developmental disabilities, things like autism and other spectrum related disorders, that got me interested in communication. Was able to do a double major before I graduated from Ohio State University, and then I fell into audiology, and it was a good fit for me. But I've always been passionate about resilience and stress management, just due to my exposure as a child and wanting basically to help my family, but feeling kind of helpless, like a lot of us do, because at the end of the day, while we have amazing resources in this world, and don't get me wrong, when you like, resilience is asking for help when you need it. When you have had such degraded function, or it's lasted long enough to where your sleep is compromised, your performance in your job or your personal life is compromised, ask for help. That is strength. We have this old school mentality of mental toughness where suppress it, suck it up, keep grinding forward until people inevitably burn out and break down. And I would argue that's not strength. I mean, it does take, there are acute times in our lives where we do just need to embrace the suck. Don't get me wrong. That is absolutely true.
Fair. Yeah.
But acknowledging when you need help is strength. But again, if you can intervene earlier, if you have known backboards in your life with those support systems, and I love the concept of perceived support, just knowing that we have people and systems there to provide help for us when needed, that encourages resilience. But my point is, you can't help ultimately anybody if they don't want it. So it is a personal accountability task when it comes to full recovery from a lot of our mental health disorders. So when you talk about generalized anxiety, when you talk about major depressive disorder and some of these other DSM-5, PECS Revised, or whatever it is criteria now, our institutions can help walk you back a little bit. I love to think of the pain scale. So in undergrad at Ohio State, I worked in palliative medicine. I was an intern that worked in pain and palliative care, end of life care for terminally sick individuals, high rates of pain, poor prognoses, very tough management. I worked with a psychologist and her team, but there were other physicians on it. And when we would talk about pain management, something that stuck with me, one of the physicians said, when I hear that someone has a 9 out of 10 for pain or a 10 out of 10, my goal is not to get rid of their pain. One, it's impossible. And two, it wouldn't help them as far as their functioning. You never want to walk anyone back to 0. You want to take that 9 and bring it down to a 6 or a 7. That is a world of difference. That changes the perception, obviously physically, but also even more important sometimes subjectively. And then you can start leaning on your personal support systems. You can start becoming more active, maybe sleeping a little bit better, maybe eating a little bit better. And you want to encourage personal accountability. You want people to walk themselves back from that 5 or 6 to 0 or 1. In this case, unfortunately, it wasn't possible with the patient population we're talking about. But moving from a 9 to a 6 in the medical realm, it is the ideal for a lot of pathologies that we talk about. As an audiologist, I deal with tinnitus or ringing in the ears. Can be quite bothersome for some of the patients that I deal with. And we have the same rating scale up to 10. My goal is not to take your 10 down to a 0. My goal is to take your 10 down to a 6. And then that helps encourage habituation or training of the mind to condition it to not emphasize or focus on it as much. And then it becomes a background stimulus, just like your refrigerator running that you don't pay attention to. Again, another long-winded answer from me, but I've become very passionate as I've learned about stress management and resilience more, that we want to make sure we are there to help people. But sometimes the best help is just knowing that you're there to help, and then people getting tools and education and knowledge so they can then impart their own resilience on themselves and then ask for help if and when they need it. I love the thought that wisdom is really just not knowledge applied. We live in a time where there are so many resources and so much data, information, and knowledge on how to be resilient, on how to effectively manage stress. But you can read every book in the world, and it doesn't do any help whatsoever if you don't start applying some of those concepts that could work well in your life. I love the quote from Bruce Lee: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, make what is uniquely your own. And so when I write on Substack or when I talk to people, I'll give a lot of different strategies. Don't use all of them. Pick a few that you think might work, apply them to your life. That's the most important part. While I love providing education, the biggest takeaway is always make sure you find something that is actionable for you and start working on it, or all of this is a waste of time.
Can I ask you about the was it hospice that you worked for? You worked for or palliative care?
It was a cancer hospital, and palliative care is end of life care. So
right,
when people had poor prognoses, so it would be a psychology team, a pain management team, family education, and financial assistance team. Basically, it wasn't there was definitely collaboration with hospice, but I myself did not work in a hospice.
Gotcha. Okay, and so can I ask you, what was it? What is it like for you as you're going through that course, let's just say, for figuring out what was your original idea of, okay, did you want to solve all of their pain? Was that your original intention? And that's what surprised you, that that's actually not what you're looking to do?
Well, I would help with research. So it was
Oh, I see.
but I definitely had the assumption that the physicians and the people I supported in their research, that their goals were to absolve people of their problems, get rid of everything. And that is how you help people. And I grew, like when I took counseling classes in my psychology major, everyone came in, and when we would do like simulations of a counseling session, we were all problem fixers. We all wanted to just tell you what to do and solve your problem for you. That is not how you help people. You help people by allowing them to figure out how to solve their own problems. Sometimes less is more, and just being there. Of course, there are strategies to ask open-ended questions or give direction to help people find the solutions that inevitably what will work best for them. Because what works perfectly for me, particularly when we talk about stress management, might not work at all for you. Individual variability is so high, and there are so many options, once again, that the best support when we talk about helping others is often perceived. It's often just knowing you're there for them. Of course, objectively, there are things that we can do when it's needed, but insisting that I help you and intervening when it is not asked is often detrimental to the person you're trying to help, especially if you're trying to walk them back to zero and acting like everything is fine. That's not sustainable.
Even in like small unit leaderships, that's something that we're advised not to do, is to give everybody the answer. The idea is that you want to build confidence in that I can figure it out if I don't know, because I think one of the issues that that I guess like that I saw even in my unit was that at first there was this, at least when I checked in, we were all a bunch of Lance Corporals. It was like a massive group of Lance Corporals that came in at the same time, right around the time I did. And so there was just a big pool of us. And so there was this feeling of like, okay, we're going to rely on this one person who actually knows it. And for a long time we did, until we started all picking up rank. And it was a thing of like, no, you're going to lead it. And so now that I didn't spend the time as a junior Marine actually learning the material and stumbling through learning something new and how to actually set things up, well, now I'm at a position where I have to, because I'm leading juniors. And so I think one of the key points there that was helpful that I wanted to implement when I picked up was that I wanted to have the guys struggle a little bit, not suffer, but struggle to figure things out. And so if it became a thing where, okay, we've been at this thing for the entire day and we're not making any progress whatsoever, I come in and maybe I give them a hint and go, hey, what do you think about this thing? And start asking questions about things that might lead them to the answer, but never hand it to them, because then you get what happened to us, where we're now in leadership positions and we don't know what we're talking about. That's detrimental, especially for the newer generation that we're supposed to be teaching and monitoring. So I think that even in small unit leadership, handing people the answers, it's the old saying of you can walk a person to a lake, but if you could fish for a person, but if you don't teach them how to fish, they'll eat for you'll eat for a day. I butchered that. One you'll eat for a day, and then the other one you can eat for a lifetime. And so it's that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that you said that resonated with me is just the idea of leadership itself. Like, obviously, to be a good leader, you first need to, and continuously, even after the fact, be able to be a good follower too, be able to take direction and listen to it, have an open mind. But I love asking the question. So I do a lot of different types of training, and one of them is leadership training in relation to resilience. And I'll do that for various types of groups, different ranks in the civilian sector, different status, if you will. And so I ask in the room, who's a leader? And oftentimes, maybe I'll get some hands raised for the highest ranking individuals, or the LPOs if it's a certain enlisted group of individuals. But the expectation, as we talk about it more, is being a leader is really a decision. It is not related to your rank. It is not related to your status. You can set the example. And of course, even outside of work, we could be leaders in our families, in our communities. And it's a mindset. And you can set the example no matter where you fall on the perceptive totem pole of a rank structure or organization. And that mindset, knowing that being a good leader is also being a good follower, that's a lifelong process that you continuously to respect that dichotomy of, even if I am the CO of a command. Like I still need to be able to listen well to people that are consulting me or to the people that I am serving, because ultimately leaders are serving the people that work with them.
Right.
So remembering that, then it allows for more effective communication. So you can not only respect the people you work with, but find ways to best support them to accomplish your respective missions.
And can I ask you, because you said leadership is a decision, right?
Yeah.
So for you, when and how did you decide I want to lead, I want to be an officer? Because when you make that decision to be an officer, you're making a decision to be a leader, to lead people. So where did that come from for you?
Well, I didn't decide I wanted to be an officer. So I, I went
Interesting.
through, I've always loved the military. I've always loved reading books about the military, ever since even before I was a teenager. Passionate about history, and our military and our evolution and what we've done for the world. So I went to undergrad once again, double majored, determined that I want to be an audiologist, went to grad school after undergrad, which is a 4-year doctoral program. And I assumed going through grad school, like, oh, I might get a cool civilian job at a VA, or maybe even for an actual military command as a civilian audiologist. I didn't know about the opportunities that was serving in uniform as an audiologist. And it was a classmate and friend of mine 2 years ahead of me, who ended up commissioning into the Navy, and that I first learned of that being an opportunity. But it honestly wasn't until my 4th year in my doctoral program. And that 4th year is an externship. So it's a year long. I'm working and learning on the job. And I was at the Cleveland Clinic, which is a really cool comprehensive program, multiple rotations in all the different areas of our scope of practice. And there at the time was a retired captain in the Navy, a former dentist, but he went into what's called executive medicine or leadership. So he ended up being a CO of a hospital. He had a lot of cool experience, and he and I got pretty close too. And he encouraged me to consider that route. I applied for what's called a direct accession. And with my doctoral degree, I mean, of course, I could decide to enlist if I wanted to, but I wanted to be an audiologist for the military. So you come in as an O3. So I went from, after graduating, to ODS, which stands for Officer Development School in Newport, Rhode Island. I went there for basically modified boot camp. It's nothing like what you went through when you were a Marine. Were you in Paris Island, by the way, or where'd you go?
No, I'm a Hollywood Marine,
Okay,
California. Yeah,
very
San
good,
Diego.
very good. I haven't been out there. I've been to Paris Island, but yeah, I'm sure very similar programs no matter what. A lot of funny stories out of that area that we can talk about offline. But yeah, so I went to Newport, Rhode Island for 5 weeks, did that program, which was a blast. Loved that quite a bit. And I learned in a very short amount of time what it is to be an officer, or the expectations at least, because I don't think you ever figure it out. Just like I'm a dad. I'm a dad of 3 children right now. I don't have it figured out. I'm figuring it out every day. And that's very true of being an officer and a leader too. Like if you think you know everything, you're messing up. Lifelong learning, continuous attempts to be the best that you can be every day, because there's no such thing as perfection. You always want to look for improvement possibilities. And so in that 5-week program, learned about, I'm not only going to be an audiologist in the military, I will be an officer, and the expectations behind leadership with that. And then just through my time over the past more than 11 and a half years, trying to get better and better every day with it, and loving the opportunity to serve.
And how many years? I'm sorry, how many years total?
I've been in almost 12 so far.
What are you thinking so far? Do you think that this is you're going to go to the end, to retirement?
If they'll keep me, I'm very happy in uniform. I'm very happy. I seriously joke that I feel I get to serve those who serve. So I'm in what's called the Medical Service Corps. There's 32 specialties that fall underneath that, but as an audiologist, that is one of them. So think optometrists, physical therapists, and a lot of medical disciplines that are not physicians, which is a different corps, the medical corps. But there are different corps of officers in the Navy, and I fall in medical service corps, and it's even in the name, medical service.
Right.
I serve those who serve, and it's a really good gig in that I get to be an audiologist, I get to be a leader, I get to do all these other amazing collaterals like stress management resilience now, because I fell into that, and I'm, as you know, equally passionate about that, if not more so on some days. But the overlap between the two, as we talked about in the beginning, and that's true of so many areas of life. I love resilience so much because it impacts all life domains. Don't get me wrong. skills don't necessarily directly translate. You can be really strong or really physically resilient, and that does not necessarily mean you are mentally resilient. The concepts are the same, but we don't always translate them that well. But when you start opening your mind and looking for convergence and opportunities for that overlap, and once you know the way, you see it in all things. Miyamoto Musashi, and it can be so true with with a productive perspective on looking for how can I be the best person that I can be every day in the respective domains that I get to serve. In my case, as a father, as a husband, as an officer, as an audiologist, as someone who teaches resilience, as a writer that I'm aspiring to be, as somebody who tries to contribute to my community, my country, and just really honestly as a man. So as a human being, how can I make every interaction, every moment an opportunity to do the best with what I have, which is ultimately uncertain when it comes to my time on this planet.
With resilience, if you can remember or think of moments in which resilience showed up in your life, what would those memories be?
Yeah, many, and we could spend hours talking about this, but one in particular, it didn't start off with resilience, but boy, was it a lesson to help me shift and become a husband, a father, and a man. So I met my wife in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune. She's a speech pathologist. I'm an audiologist. So people who understand, again, I took speech and hearing science. There's a lot of overlap in those two professions. We often go to undergrad together. So when I met her at a restaurant, that was an easy icebreaker, gave me an in, and thankfully she kept me around. We dated long enough to where she decided she would keep me around a little bit longer. And so we ended up getting married directly before we transferred to Guam. So we did get civilly married about a year before our ceremony. But in August of 2016, we were ceremoniously married. It was amazing. That captain I mentioned, that Navy dentist captain, he spoke at my wedding. And it was incredible. We actually were in the reception hall at Camp Lejeune and had an amazing time. Core memory of mine that I love quite a bit. 2 weeks later, we go to Guam. Nutso trip getting over there, settling in. We're on the other side of the world, literally 24 hours of travel, opposite time zone from continental United States. My wife is one of 6 siblings, very close with her, very close with her family. Her sisters are her best friends. That her family talks every day. I'm very close with my family and friends. So it's a big stressor just moving in and of itself. Right. Uncertain time, exciting, but at the same time, nuts. In the first month, we find out we're pregnant. And very exciting. We knew we wanted to have children. We weren't trying, but a gift. And we were very excited. Unfortunately, we lost that child. So about,
sorry to hear that.
Yeah. It's funny, like it's not funny, but you hear the phrase that childbirth is the most common miracle that people experience. And it's true. I mean, obviously children are born every day. It is a very common miracle. It's amazing. But what you don't hear as often until you experience it and realize how prevalent it is the loss of a child is the most common tragedy. And unfortunately, we've experienced several losses. And just that's how it goes sometimes. But that first one hit us hard. We were on the other side of the world. Our support systems weren't there. When we found out we were expecting, I started training in mixed martial arts and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Became a passion of mine really quick. So not only was I working at a hospital full time, but I was training twice a day, before and after work. I wasn't home that often. Now, don't get me wrong. When I was around, I'm big. I like that book, the 5 Love Languages or whatever it's called. I'm big into that. That helps me like figure out how you interact with somebody else quite a bit, like how you love, how you feel love. It's a very cool formatting of just understanding the differences in people and expectations and delivery of love. I'm big into physical acts. I will craft a life around you to try to make sure you don't have too many stressors on your plate, which is ironic because we just talked about how preventing stress for others is not necessarily helping them, but I'm big into that, unfortunately. So I was doing that. Don't get me wrong, my wife and I were connecting, but at the same time, I'm an audiologist. She's a speech pathologist. We were not effectively communicating. I thought I was supporting her, but really she just needed my presence. She just needed to be with her and to grieve with her. And I was more so trying to distract myself to focus on efforts because I was struggling, but I wasn't talking about how I was struggling. I was trying to do that old school mental toughness, suck it up and persist and support my wife through those physical acts without just connecting with her and crying.
Hmm.
and talking through how hard it was. And we got to a point after that loss where we were growing apart. Resentment was building. And there was a night that I'll remember forever that she called her dad, and she was thinking about going back to the United States for a little bit, and maybe us taking a break and just figuring things out,
Hmm.
because how hard things got. And thankfully, I have a really good relationship with her father. And he said, why don't you sleep on this, hang around, talk to Kyle a little bit more. I'm there for you, but give it a try. And we implemented something called, I'm corny with names of things sometimes. And we talked about how I love intentional stress challenges. So this is something I talk about, fasting from devices, which we'll talk about that later so I can get back to the story. We implemented something called technology time. So basically, absence of technology, complete presence with each other in the evenings, which is when we did it, when we were around each other every night. No technology, maybe background music, but nothing else. No phones, no distractions, no TV, just complete presence with one another. We also had devotions. So we would read a scripture, and we would read like led discussion points on just getting to know each other better. And over the course of weeks, I got to understand my wife, see her perspective. We talked through a lot of the challenges that we had been through. And while we had been married civilly over a year at that point, I think that's when we really truly became husband and wife. We really grew together. I shifted my perspective, my empathy, my ability to connect with her, and really my ability to openly communicate with her things that I used to think were weakness, which is talking about my feelings. And we connected incredibly, and the trajectory of life changed after that loss. And we were pregnant with my daughter less than a month later. And since then, I've had two boys, and yeah, life's amazing. So, like, while that loss was incredibly hard, it was also something that changed me, and that loss had meaning. And I reflect on it often, and I try to live for all the children that I've lost, and of course the children that I do have, and the wife that I have, and the opportunity that I have in this life. But I was not. I had that old school mentality of resilience initially in response to that loss, of trying to dial in and basically go on autopilot and keep working, keep grinding. And it shifted how I respond to adversity, particularly when it comes to interpersonal relationships with the people I care about most. So that was a lesson in resilience that I've applied to subsequent losses and subsequent challenges in my life, particularly when it comes to the most important things in my life, which is my family.
I just would like to take a moment to say that I'm so sorry that you had to go through something like that. And obviously, there's good things that came from it, but I can't imagine the pain and what that was like. And so, if I may, and the answer can always be no, I would like to ask about just for anybody that's gone through an experience like that, and maybe they're struggling with having lost a child. What was what was the feeling like for you? What was the thing that you were trying to cover up and I guess suck up through?
Well, I was hurting. Like, I'm obviously a male, and so I don't fully understand what it's like to be a mother with a
Hmm.
baby in your belly, to be growing life. And we can have these perceptions sometimes of like how people should respond to adversity. And so I was dealing with a lot of internal conflict on, like, one, I'm so disappointed in the loss of our child. And but at the same time, talking to the doctors about like how common this is, and it's very likely that we'll get pregnant again soon and be able to have children, and we can do tests if we need to, but it's not at that point yet. So I was trying to be like optimistic. I was trying to apply again mis misunderstandings, at least for me, and then expectations of others of resilience at that time, without just understanding that, man, the loss of a child is going to affect me differently, even though it hurt, than my wife. We were just not on the same page. And again, resentment built on both of our sides, and we didn't realize it. We didn't realize how, I mean, I was struggling because, yeah, I was really disappointed. I was excited to be a dad, but also one of my biggest weaknesses is, unfortunately, when my wife is struggling, when people I care about most are struggling, that almost hurts me more than adversity coming at me and affecting me alone. Like, I teach all the time, focus on what you can control, and understand what your uncontrollables are. And with the uncontrollables, either accept them or avoid them. And really, those are your only two choices. Communication is always possible. I bring that in now because of my lesson that we're talking about. But really, it's a choice. When you have an uncontrollable stressor in your life, you either accept it or avoid it. So in acceptance, sure, there's coping strategies. But yeah, I tend to have my biggest source of stress be an uncontrollable, which is how other people are responding to adversity, at least the people that are most important in my life. So it was hard for me because I saw her suffering and I wanted to impart my perspective on her, which is so unrealistic because I just wanted to help her. So it caused even more tension between us because
Right.
I'm trying to help her through it. And again, you can't help people. And especially when you're grieving, like the grieving process just takes time. And this is unrelated to this in some ways, but I love the quote that the worst thing that has ever happened to somebody is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. At this point in our life, this was the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Honestly, harder losses have happened in our life since then. And there'll be adversity, unfortunately, for everyone listening or not. Inevitably in your life, there's going to be loss of life, of possessions, of occupations. There's going to be significant stressors in your life. That's inevitable, unfortunately. I don't wish it on anybody, but at the same time, I do wish stress on everyone too. Not severe stress, but you can't be resilient without stress. You have to experience it. You have to recover from it. And unfortunately, death is inevitable. Death is undefeated. It affects all of us. And we don't talk about it that much because it is uncomfortable and it seems morbid. But you remember that death is possible before it happens, and it makes you appreciate life. And the experience that I had with our first loss and some of the stories that I have after that have made me appreciate life that much more. Again, for the unknown time that I have here, I want to live to the fullest for those that are not here anymore, to include my children, to include everyone who has served, and really everyone in general. We have the opportunity to live every day. We choose, honestly, how we live every day until sometimes the unknown, the uncontrollable, that is death, comes for us. And that can be an empowering perspective when you talk about interactions that you have with the people you care about most, how you go about your individual pursuits in your life. These are all opportunities because death, again, is an uncontrollable. When you contemplate death or when you experience death, your perspective on that and how you respond to that, that's resilience. That is the opportunity to see, to make light out of darkness. You can and honestly should grieve, but that grieving process also shows that you cared, that you loved. And when you can sit back, and why I love the concept of intentional stress, when you can do some of this stuff before it inevitably comes, you've now prepared your mindset, your body, your spirit to respond to that hardship that I promise you is coming in some way, shape, or form. So when you can condition and cause plasticity in your system to improve and be prepared, that is self-care. That is true preparation to live life to the fullest so that you can effectively respond to inevitable hardship, inevitable chaos, and then recover from it so you can continue to live to your fullest and honor those who unfortunately are not here anymore.
That's a beautiful message. I think that a lot of times, well, two things I got from that. We talk about the uncontrollables. For me, I don't want to generalize because it's very different for each individual person. But I do see this tendency from guys, which is that a lot of times the scariest thing for me, I'll just start there. The scariest thing for me has always been a loss of control. That has happened for me. The traumatic events that I've experienced throughout my life, whether it was my parents' divorce or a very serious breakup I had, it's just the thing that, like, I don't have any control of what's happening next, and I think that has been the thing that has frightened me most, is to be in those situations where I'm like, what? I can't stop this thing from happening, and that includes death. And so I think that it's a big, I think it's an important topic to talk about. Is obviously it's going to be different for each individual, but for me, that's one of my bigger fears. That's one of my top 5 fears is the loss of control, including death, because I can't stop it from happening. I can't do anything. And for me, my purpose is connected to, or at least in the past has been connected to, if I can't stop bad things from happening, then how am I of service? How am I of use? And that is what has been the hardest thing to go get over, and realize that it's first of all, there are uncontrollables, and you can't control other people's paths. The only control that I have is what I do next, or what I do in this moment. And the biggest thing for me has been learning to take care of me first. If I'm good, then I can start to look at other people around me. But if I'm not good, I'm not going to be able to help. And that has been a hard lesson for me. What has it been like for you?
You said a lot of things there that I want to reflect on real quick, and then I can talk about
Absolutely.
that a little
Please.
bit more. So the uncontrollables of life and the fear of them. I love to think about concepts and the concept of uncertainty. We like to be certain, but just like we would love to know when death is coming, if you knew when you were going to die, that would change your life in every way. It would remove a lot of the beauty. It would remove uncertainty is what adds opportunity.
Absolutely.
I like the quote. I don't know if anyone said it before me. I thought of it one day. So someone else said it, and it resonated with me and stuck with me. I apologize. But I put on Substack one time, whether or not you think you have free will, you're correct. So there are so many
I love
uncontrollables.
that.
There are so many uncontrollables in this world, including our death, that we tend to be afraid of. But without death, life has no purpose. Life has no meaning. Life is not special. If we all live forever, and if we all had control over everything in our lives, most meaning, most beauty, most everything would be diminished. So while it is uncomfortable, discomfort is a good thing. Experiencing discomfort and then getting more comfortable with that discomfort is resilience. Again, I hope everybody experiences stress every day, because there's your opportunity to endure, experience it, and recover from it. That is how you get stronger. Growth does not happen without stress. Discomfort is necessary for improvements, but it does take a mental shift of perspective in uncertainty, in death, in fear. We all have fears, and self-reflection is one of the most important challenges that I pose to people, if not the most important challenge, because without awareness, there is no opportunity for effective intervention. We need to understand situations, or even more importantly, ourselves, in order to understand our true opportunities to maintain the edge that is our strengths, and then improve upon our areas of opportunity. So knowing what your fears are, knowing what your values are, these are all worthwhile endeavors to enhance the awareness and understanding of yourself, so you can determine where to add a little bit of discomfort in your life with intentional stress, and slowly but surely improve for as long as you have the opportunity to do so. Remind me of your other question. I apologize.
It was just regarding when talking about the uncontrollables, and basically what is it? What has been your take from, I guess, what to do, how to handle that mindset of I want to be able to control things to better help people, but I can't do it if I'm myself am struggling. And so how do you make peace with that? How do you tackle something like that?
Thank you. And now you're reminding me of another thing that you said that resonated, that I wanted to reflect on. So
Absolutely.
you talked about taking care of yourself first. Most people who serve in the military, and honestly, most people in general, are pretty altruistic. They are concerned with helping others, at the very least, people they care about. So whether it's your family, your friends, your pet, people tend to want to care for things that are important to them. But if you don't take care of yourself, you're eventually going to burn out. You're eventually going to become ineffective in your performance and what you want to do to care for others. So I love the concept of all decisions should have an aspect of both selfish and selfless considerations. So rather than making something completely selfless, you're gonna burn out. You're gonna build resentment. You're gonna have perspectives that feel like I'm sacrificing so much eventually, and not getting much in return, and that's gonna be challenging. And of course, if you're completely selfish, you're a narcissist, you're a psychopath, and that's not gonna go well for you either. But having an aspect of both, there's your harmony. There's your balance that you're looking for in order to maintain kind of spiritual resilience, if you will, to be proud of the fact that not only am I looking out for my own health holistically, but I'm looking out for others too, so I can transcend whatever it is that my unique skill sets are for my opportunity once again on this planet.
I would like to hit a little bit on, if you don't mind, what have you learned about being a good partner? What does that mean?
So being a good, in
Yeah,
my
like
case, being a good
in your
husband.
case, right? In your specific role, having what have you learned about what you might have thought marriage was about versus what it has shown to be about in your marriage?
So like I obviously dated other people prior to my wife, and even up to the loss that we talked about, I had this mindset that being a good husband was taking care of everything that I possibly can
Right.
for her. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe a husband should be able to protect and provide for their family and take that responsibility on wholeheartedly and be the best version of themselves and show up every day with that mindset to be able to execute to the best of their abilities. That being said, I also like to tell people when it comes to relationship, there is no right way, perfect way to conduct a relationship. As long as you and your significant other are on the same page, do you. We love to project and make judgments of how people operate in this world, but there's so much individual variability. So when it comes to a relationship, developing expectations, regular check-ins, communications, making sure your actions are aligning with the values that you both have, with those expectations you've discussed. Again, communication is key. And if you are on the same page, you are good to go. It's when you assume things, and we know assuming makes an ass out of you and me, that great phrase. But when you think that because my personal values or my personal love language is being executed, that we're good to go, without that check-in, without that communication, you could slip up no matter how altruistic your actions are. So again, there's no right way to do it, as long as it's right for you and your other half.
I think I hear communication is key all the time. What's interesting is how people think they're communicating versus how the communication might come through for another person. I've seen plenty of times in my life where I think I'm communicating, where from my perspective, I am not only saying it, but at some points when the communication starts to get worse, you almost like yell it. It's like I feel like I'm yelling this, and it's like the other person doesn't hear me, and that's why the thing about love languages really matter, because what I found out is that it's my interpretation of communicating is somebody else's. It's like I'm speaking a different language to them, and so for me, I'm saying everything I need to. But if I don't check in with that person, for me, the check-ins were the part I was missing, and so I think that checking in with a person of, am I hearing you? Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? Is there anything that uh, do you feel like I'm understanding your point? Vulnerable questions that I wasn't ready for, because you think about, if I can't control this, if I can't control my own interpretation of what's happening, then that's scary, right? And so I think that communication is more than just say the thing. Make sure the person speaks the language you do, or you're
Yeah.
saying it in a common language.
Like I said earlier, my wife is a speech pathologist. I'm an audiologist, expert communicators, right? But obviously at the beginning of our marriage, not doing so well there. And to your point, there's talking and then there's communicating. So talking is me
Yes,
speaking,
yes.
me speaking at you and me thinking, okay, now you know where I'm coming from, so we're good. Communication is a two-way street. And if anything, communication is more not hearing. Hearing is the sounds that are coming out of your mouth are hitting my ears, and it's happening. Listening is active engagement of the prefrontal cortex outside of just my auditory cortex taking it in. Listening is trying to empathize, see your perspective, and have that two-way street, not just me making sure you hear me, but me, I'm sorry, not making sure you listen to me, but me truly listening to you. So if I'm just here to make my point and I'm focused on me and not you, we're not communicating. We're talking at each other. So communication is absolutely both, of course, speaking whatever is on our mind, but even more importantly, in my opinion, listening to the other individual and ensuring that you both are being understood. So yeah, and another point that you said, like sometimes you've gotten to the point of yelling. When you communicate and how you communicate is more often than what you communicate. So if you are in an emotional state, I know in my past and even to today, if I am emotional, I am not going to say and do things that I'm proud of. So
Right.
coming back to that awareness piece that I talked about, recognizing if and when you are in a stressed response, or more so a reaction in a stress state, and that you are emotionally reasoning, that's probably not the best time to speak or to act. You probably want to stop, assuming it's not a safety concern, take some intentional nasal inhales and prolonged exhales, which is going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and slow yourself down. You want to calm that system down and try to manage the emotional brain and then reactivate the rational brain, that prefrontal cortex. You want to decrease the physiologic responses in your body through things like intentional breathing, through things like, first, if I know I'm stressed, just the awareness alone, like, oh, I know I'm stressed. And now we can start thinking about what is the stressor and what is my perspective of it? Because we tend to focus quite a bit on that other person and what they did and not our perspective of it, and challenging that perspective with other considerations. And if you can delineate the stressor and the stress after you know you're stressed, then you can start thinking about controllables and uncontrollables within each, and then coping and problem solving. And most importantly, decreasing your stress response so you can rationally respond rather than emotionally react.
You know what really helped me figure out when it's a good time to check in with myself? Because I think like the biggest thing I wasn't doing before was I didn't set boundaries for myself well enough. And so where's my stopping point when I get upset? I didn't have that. And so because I didn't have that, I would redline until I'm about to say something really mean. And I just like would stop and walk away. And that can be like stonewalling for another partner, where it's like, I feel like you just quit the argument. And so now I'm not going to get a chance to say my piece. Right. And so that's what would create a lot of issues for me. And that just was because I didn't have a line where I was like, hey, I'm getting above a level of emotional stability than I want to be in. And in order for me to have like a sensible conversation that isn't going to hurt me or you, I think it's important that I stop here. We can come back to it. I think that's the part that I didn't do, is that because I didn't have the boundaries, I allowed myself to get what we call in therapy flooded. I was flooded. And so I was so triggered by the emotional response that I stopped being reasonable in my approach to how I was going to say things, in what way, because at that point now I'm just trying to defend myself. I am fully in self-protected mode.
Yep.
And so I'm doing everything in my power to prevent myself from being hurt any further. And so for me, what I would do is I would just walk away and just like, I'm done. And then walk away and not say, hey, we can come back to this. And so that's important for the other person as well, to consider that, hey, this person is having a different flooding of emotions, and they're going through their own thing. And so if there was just that line for me of recognizing, this is making me real upset, I have to think why that has made me so upset, because there's usually something else to it. And so for me, it was just figuring out, hey, okay, if I see myself getting upset, but not to a point where I'm going to shut down, I can reach this point and go, hey, actually, this is making me really upset. And I think something's going on. I need some time to think about it and figure out what's happening. We can come back to this conversation, but I need to cool down. And having that ability to do it is extremely powerful. And that's all just me. It's not me controlling anybody else. It's just me. And I thought that was really important, a really important lesson I learned about myself in therapy.
You're speaking to your experience out loud. You're talking about what is happening that you are aware of inside of yourself. So really your actions wouldn't be much different in what you just explained, but you explain it to the person that you're talking to, like, hey, I'm feeling kind of riled up right now. I'm getting kind of defensive. I'm probably in the wrong state to keep talking about this. Let me take a minute. We'll come back to this. My wife is so good at that when it comes to our children. So if you didn't know, kids are crazy.
I could only imagine.
Obviously, their brains are developing. They're all emotional brain. They're all limbic system.
Right.
So the most irrational thing can get them riled up because it's a 3-year-old boy. But that can be a challenge for the parents. But my wife is so good, rather than me, who sometimes will go on autopilot and do the suppression that I know is not effective, so I can just keep executing those physical acts. I'm still guilty of that today.
Right.
My wife is so good at saying, I'm feeling kind of frustrated right now. You're not picking up your toys. You're jumping off the couch, which you know is against the rules. I'm going to take a minute to take some deep breaths, and then we're going to come back to this and talk about it some more. So she talks about, like, she basically is talking through her experience and then her actions and why she's doing it. And she is showing the kids exactly how to effectively respond rather than emotionally reacting and blow up on them. And then I see my children doing the same thing with each other, or doing the same thing naturally in a situation, and just experiencing and demonstrating that emotional intelligence. It's such a beautiful thing. But like, again, we're all leaders, and you doing that now, you're teaching others when you do that while you're effectively and selfishly taking care of yourself. Such a beautiful thing. Also, I very much relate to what you described, and would respond to a lot of situations, or I guess I should say react to a lot of situations and arguments in the past that way. But I also had this perspective that stress is linear. So basically, if we continue this conversation this way, I'm going to blow up. I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to say things to try and quote unquote win, which, by the way, you never win an argument with people you care about, no matter how well you get your point across, or what happens. If you're trying to win, you're losing. And that's true with any argument with people you care about. But stress being linear is definitely something I would feel in my body, like, up, it's building. My fuse is getting shorter and shorter. I'm about to blow up. Here we go. It's too much. I'm going to blow up. But for a variety of reasons, whether it be reading, life experience, but one of the best domains I like to experience this and test it is muscular endurance exercise, or particularly isometric holds. So whether that be the horse pose, or my favorite one being the plank, just holding a plank for as long as you can. Pretty quickly, your body is going to start sending legitimate stress signals that I am fatigued. My muscles are in pain. Those urges, those sensory signals coming from your body, and how you respond to them or react to them, ultimately is a decision. Don't get me wrong. Eventually, you need a break based on how physically adapted you are to that isometric hold. But you go and you get down on a plank after this podcast today, and you time it and then break. I promise you that tomorrow, if you do it again and you make the decision ahead of time, I'm going 5 seconds longer. When my body tells me it needs to break, I know I can go 5 more seconds. I'm going to focus on my breathing instead, rather than what my body's telling me, because the mind controls the body. Mm-hmm. And then the more you experience that, the more you realize these urges that we feel, and don't get me wrong, we have urges all over the place, whether it be from temperature, from hunger, from all kinds of discomforts in our life that we've, thanks to technological innovation, which is amazing, but we've also conditioned ourselves to react to urges like it's a necessity. No, they're not necessities. Not too long ago, humans were able to endure and deal with all of this and some in ways that we've evolved to be able to manage those urges quite effectively. So rather than being victims to our urges, stress is not linear. How we react or respond to stress ultimately is a consequence of, you're better off with experience, with perceived support systems. But at the end of the day, when we talk about true controllables in this world, interpretation of our thoughts. So some people say thoughts are under control. I don't know about you, but I have some wild thoughts that come into my head that come out of nowhere that I don't know how I got there. That was not a decision I made to have.
We call intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. So I don't control all of my thoughts, but I definitely control how I interpret them. And then I control how I respond to them. So my thought interpretation and my actions at the end of the day are my two controllables. And the more you practice causing discomfort and some amount of manageable stress, and reframing your perspective in that way, you start teaching yourself that stress is not linear, that you are not a victim of your urges. It takes time, it takes intention, it takes focus, it takes consistency. But without question, again, coming back to that self-reflection, whatever areas of opportunity in your life that you want to improve upon, I promise you can with that kind of mindset. And the more you train it, the better you'll get. You can't be brave without fear. You can't be resilient without stress. So the more you experience things that you want to improve upon, the better you'll get at it. I promise you.
They say that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the act with the fear included. Is that you go and you do it scared. That's courage. Absolutely. And so I think that's a great point. I do want to ask you about fatherhood. What has that journey been like for you? Is it anything like you thought it was going to be?
It is the best form of delayed gratification that I've ever pursued in my life. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of instant gratification too. I just had the best morning with my boys. Again, I do jujitsu. We for an hour this morning. It was funny. One day, my 3-year-old, he might even been 2 at the time when he first came up to me. But before you start an open roll, you slap and then bust a rock and then you start. My son walked up to me one time. Again, I don't know if he had turned 3 already, or if it was, I think it was even before that. But he comes up, he has his hand up, so I bump his hand, and then he does a fist. We had never done that before. I'd never taught him that, but I bring them to class when I teach and when I train, and he had observed that. And then he starts getting his hands out, and we start grappling. So for a long time now, we've been doing that. And this morning we were practicing double legs and just grappling around and having fun for an hour. And those moments, I think of the experiences that I had before I was a father. And don't get me wrong, amazing life experiences I wouldn't trade for the world. But the love that I experience now, the fulfillment that I have through them, it's the most amazing experience I've ever had. So no one should do anything in this world. Not everyone needs to be a parent, but for me, it is my why. Everything starts with being a father and a husband and a good man. But they're all interrelated, because if you're not a good husband, you're not a good father, in my opinion. If you're not a good man, you're not a good father. They're watching you. So no matter how hard you try to turn it on when you're with them, if you turn it off when you go away, they're watching, they're learning, they're listening. So for me, the responsibility that I fully take on and fully love, those three things for me: husband, father, and being a good man, they're interrelated. And that is my life mission. Everything else that I do and love, whether it's physical training, combat sports, resilience, it all ties back into that why. So I could talk about fatherhood all the time, but I love the quote, "The days are long, but the years fly by," because there are many days where it is delayed gratification, where it is a grind. But I'll come back to that contemplation of death. This is an extreme form of intentional stress. And what I always talk about, whether it's in person when I do stand downs or trainings, or what I try to make sure I put in my writing when I talk about um, mortality, is with intentional stress. If you are in a bad place, extreme forms of stress, adding more to that plate, it's not the time. It's time to intervene personally or with your support systems that you have, if that's effective. If you're at a point, again, like we talked about in the beginning, where you need professional help, that there's strength in asking for that, to make sure you can get back to a place of function, of adequate performance. But when you are at a relatively healthy spot in your life, and that doesn't mean the absence of stress, by the way. Stress is inevitable every day. I'm experiencing stress today. I've been up since 4:30 this morning. My youngest fell out of bed, bumped his head pretty hard.
Oh no.
I like to get up early, but it was just a abrupt way to start the day. That's okay. We still had a lot of fun this morning, and yeah, stress is inevitable. But experiencing stress on purpose makes inevitable stress in life that much easier. Nothing is easy, but the more that you can train resilience, and I fully believe resilience is a skill, it is a muscle that can be trained. You'll never get to perfection with anything, but you can optimize, you can improve, and you can use concepts in what I love, physical training, as a vehicle for resilience training of both the mind and spirit too. But there are forms of mental resilience training, like contemplation of death. That is an extreme form of mental resilience training. And if you do anything that I recommend and it makes you feel worse, stop, find something else, use your support systems once again. But those long days, when I think about the potential that tomorrow is not a given for myself, or potentially even for my children, that brings me back to the moment. And that brings me back to what is truly important. Is my wild son not listening to me really, the end of the day, really worth ruining the opportunity that is today? I'm not the best with this mindset every day, by the way, but I try to use it as much as possible to not emotionally react, to not let the day get away from me and need a good night's sleep to fully recover. That is a daily grind effort, but contemplation of death adds meaning for me to every day, adds opportunity, makes me want to live to the fullest for myself, and then again for my main why, which is my family.
When thinking about that concept of death and keeping that in mind in the everyday, just the, hey, is it really worth all that? Uh, do you think that you mentioned earlier that your relationship with your family was pretty good, and that you guys were close? Um, Did the experience with your dad, was it good? Do you have good memories with your dad? Did his teachings affect you as a dad? How would you describe that experience?
I have an excellent father. I'm very lucky to have two parents who are still married who loved me with all their hearts growing up. We were not absent of adversity, even in our nuclear family. Don't get me wrong. And I love the concept of positive and negative role models.
Hmm.
But I don't think you're one or the other. I think everyone in your life has things that you want to aspire to be like, and other things that you learn from that you want to do a little bit better than. And I think a lot of us are guilty. It's not guilty, but a lot of us are susceptible to resentment with prior generations based on shortcomings. But my parents were doing the best that they could with what they had, and they were incredible. So when I find myself reflecting on harder times, I come back to the fact that I'm very lucky to have two parents that love me. But even in for my close friends who had parents that divorced, those parents still were doing the best with what they had. And unfortunately, the divorce rate is quite high. And while I believe in doing everything that you possibly can to maintain the commitments that you make to your significant other when you do decide to spend your life with them and get married, life is life. And if it is truly detracting value from not only your life, your significant other's life, but in the case of children, their lives too, divorce can be the right answer when you've made attempts for it. So again, unfortunately, hardships are inevitable, and it's how we respond to them. It's not what happens often, it's how you respond. But coming back to my family, my dad had things that I want to do a little bit better than, and we talk about that. And I hope my kids, when they grow up, find things that they want to do better than me. There is, again, no perfection. There are many things. I am the way that I am, and I'm thankful for the way that I am because of him, because of my mom in other ways too. So the practice of gratitude, by the way, we talked about some morbid things, and reflecting on that, but reflecting on things that you're thankful for, because I can look at. I also like the concept of the most generous perspective that you can give to any person or situation. So think of the most awful thing, and there are always slivers of positivity that you can find in it, lessons, realistic optimism, or in this case, the most generous interpretation that you can give to someone and what they're doing and why. We tend to make judgments and assumptions once again, but we barely understand ourselves. How do we understand what someone else is doing and why they're doing it? We don't. At the end of the day, we tend to like have our opinions and our beliefs and our interpretations of situations seem like they're facts, but perception is reality, and you can change your perception with a decision. So when you give the most generous interpretation to somebody else and you find reasons for gratitude in your life, that's a skill. We are a culmination of our skills, and finding ways to be thankful and finding ways to be generous in your interpretation. I know I used to be quite judgmental of others, and very defensive of myself. So I like the quote that we tend to be our own lawyers and judge others.
Yeah,
a great life,
100%.
a great life shift would be to judge yourself. And that doesn't mean don't accept yourself or don't love yourself. Of course, do that. But never stop trying to improve. Never stop looking for opportunities. So judging yourself is not a negative thing. Judging yourself is lifelong learning, lifelong growth. And that is the goal. Don't get complacent. There's no coasting in life. There is no I've gotten to a point of physical prowess that I'm gonna relax now. I'm good to go. I can bench 300 pounds, so I don't need to train anymore. No, atrophy is going to happen. You're either improving or you are perishing. There's no in the middle. You are either getting better or worse. So that is a decision, and that is not only a physical thing, that is a mental thing, that is a spiritual thing, that is a social thing, that's with the relationships, and that doesn't need to be a burden. That is an opportunity because it doesn't require a lot of effort or a lot of time to improve.
I think you couple big points you hit on was I'll tell you a story with interpretations of good and bad. Life isn't black and white. Parents aren't black and white. Relationships aren't black and white. And so for a long time, life was black and white for me, especially being in the military. Geez, that's that world. It was very black and white for me. You're either good or you're not. And so for me, learning that my parents are people like me and therefore have tendencies to do things that I would perceive as good or perceive as bad is within me too. And so my parents, like you mentioned, did what they could with what they knew. And that's an important fact because they didn't have the knowledge that is available now about therapy and about trauma and what generational trauma specifically, and how that would affect their ability to exist as parents and in the world and how they show up. So I think that part is really important. That uh, it is based off of the perception too, because my perception of my dad, I recently reconnected with him. He was out of my life for the majority of it. I had stopped speaking to him completely when I was a teenager and cut him off because I didn't like the things he was saying. And so I was like, I don't want to hear it anymore. So I cut him off when I was about 13, 14 years old. And I hadn't spoken to him till just last year. So I went and I saw him and I was like, I don't even know who this person is. I heard stories about him. And at the time I still saw my dad through my mom's lens, and she has an interpretation of who he is. And so I was like, I need to form a more accurate, more current viewpoint of him, because I don't even know him. And so I went over to Mexico because he lives in Mexico, and I went and stayed some time with him. I went out and it was a week. I was like, I need to live his life for a week and step into his shoes, so to speak. I need to know where he comes from. I need to know what he does. I need to know what things he does day to day and what makes him think how he thinks. And so I went over there, and just like with my mom, because at some point I made the same realization with my mom too, which is that they're human beings doing what they can with what they know, with the tools they were handed. And yes, that doesn't mean that the things they did incorrectly didn't hurt me, because they certainly did, and it's present, and it didn't go away. But that doesn't mean that they did it with intent to hurt, that they did it with malice. That is not where it comes from. And so realizing that was really helpful for my healing and for my journey, and to look at the perspective of I don't know, assume that I don't know everything about the situation and learn what I can. And that's what I've been doing. And since I've started doing that, I continue to learn new things about something I thought I was an expert at when I was like a teenager. I was like, I know people well, like I know the stories I heard, but it's not true, because my knowledge, my interpretation has updated too. And so now the way that I see one situation is no longer how I saw it as a teenager. So therefore I'm still learning, and there's still much more for me to learn about them. And as I learn more, the more loving I am becoming. And so I think that perspective you just talked about the fact that it's not one way or the other. There are good things that you learn from your parents, and then there are things that you learn not to do. And so those are the things that have helped me understand, okay, there are things to improve upon, but it doesn't mean that they are evil human beings, because I understood it as either you're good or you're bad, and that's not healthy. So I just wanted to hit on that point, because huge deal.
And you also you just said something. You said a lot of beautiful things, by the way, and respect to you for working through that and where you got to. Very beneficial, obviously, in countless ways, not only for your relationships with them, but how you will function the rest of your life as a man and maybe future father yourself. But you talked about assuming that you don't know, and so you're coming back to that concept of uncertainty and how it helps you in this domain. Assuming uncertainty is a great perspective, because when it comes to absolute truth, there are not many that you can really completely defend. And when I say absolute, I mean that everyone across this planet agrees on that completely. And there is unquestionable. I mean, everything evolves all the time. Our understanding of every potential thing that you could consider, absolute truths are rare. And therefore, uncertainty is prevalent. And when you can have that perspective, you remove labeling, you remove definitions, good, bad, evil, and honorable. Evil evil exists, and why it does, and answering that question, I'm uncertain of that. I think sometimes, unfortunately, I mean, becoming a dad also shifted my perspective to where, like, even when I have trouble with people, they used to be a little baby, and whether they were born with genetic malformation in their
Right.
brain that makes them susceptible to narcissism or psychopathy, or whether nurture and environment and experience, or just getting lost. Like, life can get hard, and then you don't have the prior experience, you don't have the support systems, you don't have the strategies, and then you get lost, and you go down into darkness. And so I do think evil can develop too, and that you reach a point of no return, unfortunately. So it's something I do struggle with, but at the same time, I'm uncertain about it. I'm okay with it. I'm prepared for it if it comes to my life. But you're right. It is not prevalent. Evil is not prevalent. And most things are in the middle. And having that perspective of uncertainty can be beneficial in many ways. So, like, it was funny, you were talking about your fear of not being able to control things. And I wonder if it's related to that in any way because of the experiences you had as a child. But you're also applying the opposite of your fear with uncertainty to the way that you're working through it. So, again, respect to you.
Thank
I have
you.
a question for you, which, again, you can cut this out and not answer if you don't want
Go
to.
for it.
But a deep question. Do you forgive your father?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing that I thought forgiveness was about, the other person.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that if I was going to forgive them, they had to be sorry first. And while it did help that I was fortunate that he was. Um, when I went to see him, I had the intention of forgiving him regardless. And so whatever he says, I don't know what to expect. It was scary going to see him because I had ideas of who I thought he was. And so obviously if there's a fear, vulnerability is scary. And so I am being a kid again by going over there and offering my presence there and hoping that my dad behaves like my dad. And there's a fear always for me there. There has been a fear there that he won't be that and he'll do the things that I was afraid he would do. And so that played a role. But there was in my mind, I had made a decision that no matter what he says, I forgive him. And when I went over there, he apologized. That just was the cherry on top, but it wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And I want to stress that I forgave him regardless of whether or not he was sorry. And that was for me. That wasn't for him. It was for my peace because I was looking for peace. Really was
Yeah.
what I was after. And so when he did apologize, it was just like it was better than I thought because
Yeah.
I was certainly just expecting him to just say that it wasn't his fault or it was everybody else's fault. And obviously he has flaws. He's still a human being, but he apologized. And that to me was like, I told him it's over like that. The moment he apologized, I had said to him, I said, it's done. It's behind us. And let's go, let's focus on today. And that's what we did. And he agreed. And like I said, there's always going to be reasons for me to go, oh, but he did this thing. And then there was this thing he said that I didn't like. But truly, I had before that, it was just an idea of who I thought he was. And now the truth is always better for me. Like I prefer to know what's going on than for me to have an interpretation that I can't prove. Like I can't see it for myself. I haven't seen it for myself. I haven't tested the theory. So it's still just a theory. And to have that, to have the knowledge of no, this is what's happening, was for me enough. And forgiveness was about what I was ready to do and move on with.
Like you, same way for the longest time about forgiveness and apologies. Like, I need an apology before I'm going to forgive you. So I don't know if that came from generational pass down, possibly just the culture of what's promoted through media and bullcrap television. Who knows? But I definitely had that kind of perspective of, if you want my forgiveness that I'm giving you, like it's some gift that you need, you
Right.
have to apologize to me first so I can get the gift that I need to solve this problem. And of course, both sides of a wrongdoing, that's a pretty limiting perspective to have, because as you alluded to, forgiveness removes a weight from your back. At the end of the day, you're not really giving the person you forgive much. I mean, that yes, in this case, I'm sure he felt great to know that you were there. But ultimately, even you guys could have had the same experience you had. In communication, we talked about this already. It's very beneficial, and to have these conversations, that's empowering. But you forgiving him ultimately is selfishly more beneficial for you than selflessly beneficial for him. You removed weights from both of your backs, I bet, but resentment and deep-seated issues with another, the forgiveness helps you so much. And then to be on the causative side of a wrong,
Right.
apologizing is not like trying to open a door so you can be forgiven. If that is your intention, like if you're looking for that forgiveness with your apology, don't apologize.
That's a huge deal. Yeah.
So,
Go
yeah,
for it.
ownership of and learning from it. The best way that you can apologize is to learn from your mistake, to try and improve, to not let that happen again. I remember hearing when I was going through ODS, Officer Development School, to become an officer in the Navy, that officers don't apologize. And this was from what's called a Mustang, a former enlisted individual coming up to officers. And I remember, like, I'm going to keep my mouth shut right now. I've been in here for a week. I don't know any better, but that rubbed me the wrong way so quickly. And now I know that that was just wrong. So I don't know where that individual got that. Unfortunately, maybe they had a bad leader that promoted that. But no, leaders absolutely apologize, and they acknowledge their part, and then you encourage a culture of ownership. And if people are trying to avoid failure, avoid looking bad, you're going to run into some significant problems. So you
Huge,
want
huge
people that
deal.
apologize around you, not for, again, the receiving. Okay, good. Everyone's so cool with me. That's what I was looking for. I'm looking for external validation in my apology. No, I'm looking for improvement. I can't improve things that I don't own. If I want to wash that away, if I want to suppress it and act like it didn't happen, nothing's going to change. But when I acknowledge it and I want to reflect on it and build upon it, that is how you really apologize.
That's so, God, it's so important, because that apology too helped me be better at taking accountability, because he's still my dad. Like, at the end of the day, we're adults now. And I did say this to both of my parents, with my mom and my dad, is like, it's fair to say that essentially my childhood is over, but it doesn't mean that they stop being my parents. And so at some point, there are things that they do where I'm like, okay, I want to learn from this person like I would anybody else. And so we are in that adults, we're in the same adult space, but there are things I can still learn from them because they have more life experience than me. And so for him to have done that also made me better at apologizing, because there was accountability there. Accountability was demonstrated by saying, I was wrong for having done this, and you suffered because of it, and I'm deeply sorry. Like, that kind of, it made me better at apologizing, because I'm like, okay, first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that it takes a high level of vulnerability for you to apologize, for you to have said, hey, I did this wrong and you suffered because of it. And I apologize. I'm sorry. This is what I want to do to be better. And I think that that's very vulnerable. If you're willing to be vulnerable in front of people, there's a lot of courage. We talk about courage. That's courage. And
intentional stress.
Intentional stress, exactly. And so there was something from that I was able to learn, despite the fact that we're adults. But because I have more experience in a certain field, whether that's having kids, I haven't experienced that yet, so I don't know what that's like. But he gave me a little bit to learn. And my mom also did the same thing. My mom also has apologized to me and said, hey, I'm sorry that the pain that I've caused you because of my decision making. And so from both of them, I've been able to learn how to be better at taking accountability for myself, for my actions. And it's not about validation. It's about accepting that there was something that I could have done better and going towards the growth.
So my wife, I learn from her all the time. She makes me a better father by me watching the type of mother that she is. And she found this book a few years ago by a woman named Dr. Becky Kennedy. It's called Good Inside. And I've read some books on fatherhood, on parenting, that are phenomenal. This unquestionably is the best one that I've read. And things like I had heard the concept, and I don't remember where, but the generous perspectives to give to others and the reframing of why someone does something. There are countless reasons as to why someone might not respond to you saying good morning. It doesn't mean they're an asshole. It could mean many things. They could be having a bad day. We often don't treat people poorly because they're a bad person. We're projecting we're having a bad time. But coming back to good inside, just so many amazing chapters on parenthood, but really it's a book about relationships and interacting with others. And one chapter that stuck with me and is just a beautiful relation to the story you just described with your father is it's never too late to repair. I don't care what you've done and what happened. And this happens a lot with generations and families where resentment builds, an issue happens, divorce happens, and then time passes and people are out of your life. And man, making that first step, being vulnerable, taking accountability, and attempting to genuinely repair, there is the time is now. There is no period of time that passes that is now it's too late. It's never too late to repair. And what your dad did, respect to him. Of course, respect to you for opening the door to allow it and traveling to Mexico. But it is a beautiful real life example of what is possible. And again, the benefit it has in his life, great. But more importantly, talking to you now, the benefit it has in your life and the trajectory of your life going forward and the type of man and future father you may be, or just in general, the type of person you'll be and how you respond to others and take accountability for your actions, how you repair if and when you make mistakes. Obviously, we don't want to make mistakes most of the time, but it happens. And rather than suppressing it, avoiding it, trying to hide it so it doesn't impact your ego or cause shame, no, we all make mistakes. Owning it and then repairing is very important. Don't brush things under the rug. Own it, make that connection. It's never too late to repair. So that book can't recommend enough, not only for parents, but for people in general. Good inside.
Yeah, I that last part, by the way, is the most important part, the repair. In therapy, that's one of the things that was covered was you can have the disagreements. The disagreements are going to happen. The important part is the repair. If the repair isn't happening, you're creating a larger and larger rift. That's just eventually how it turns into resentment, and so that builds and it compounds, and then next thing you know, you're like, how did we get here? And that comes from just over and over again, not having the repair, and just having the disagreement. And so then what do we have in common? And so that's where the rifts, where I have missed the rifts, where that we can have the disagreement, but the repair is the important part.
We've all missed it, brother. But again, just like with repair, it's never too late. It's never too late to start trying to make changes in our own
Absolutely.
life. So,
Absolutely.
So that shift has helped me so much in so many domains. And again, when you do that, you're setting the example. You're being a leader. If you want others to repair better with you, repair better with others. If you want people to be kinder to you, be kinder to others. Show others respect to receive respect. It applies to everything. At the end of the day, I do have expectations for others. I do have boundaries, especially when it comes to safety, things that I won't allow. But I don't have a lot of expectations for others with attitude. I mean, because I know through most charitable interpretation that people might just be having hard days. Those are opportunities for me to make their day better, not for me to have expectations of, oh, they're being rude, so now you're going to get this back from me. No, every interaction is an opportunity, but we all have hard days. We all make mistakes. That repair opportunity after the fact, and then and we all make the same mistake sometimes, by the way. Very true in parenthood. My wife and I joke that we feel like we apologize to the kids about the same thing too often. But patterns happen. But assessing those patterns and trying to minimize them as much as possible is another way to take accountability and show that you truly are sorry. But things happen. Repair is necessary. Accountability is imperative. Trying to decrease patterns, but anything is possible, and therefore remembering those concepts so you can maintain the relationships that are most important to you changed my life quite a bit.
Can I ask you about how parenthood has affected your relationship with your wife? How has it evolved? Did it present? What challenges did it present?
It has enhanced our relationship in every way. So you know our story when we first got to Guam.
Right.
It has been incredibly challenging at times, whether it's from our losses, from those hard days. But again, the uncontrollable adversities in our life, like that first loss, the military, moving around, me being out of town sometimes, these are all challenges. But because of those inevitable hardships that we experienced, that led to our improved communication and the most beautiful things that we could ever ask for and hope for, our children. We can be. I know I experienced this in my family growing up. So I had one sister and two parents. If two of the four people were having a hard day, it somehow turned into everybody having a hard day with one another. Like that branched out and affected everybody, our communication. So everyone got emotional, everyone got angry, and you got into these patterns of behavior because the emotional mind was activated. And again, we don't say and do things that we're very proud of when you're emotional. And we all care about each other, so we're stressed that you're stressed, and then we're all stressed, and then we're all communicating incorrectly. Guilty of that early in my relationship, but as we have improved together, becoming a father has made me a better husband. That loss, as you know, made me a better husband, but each subsequent child we've had has brought on increased challenge, increased quote unquote burden that I wouldn't trade for the world. I love these weights in my life. I will happily carry them forever, but they are weights. They are forms of resistance that require management. And we have responded to this stress, if you will, through growth, because either you manage and recover from your stress or it causes burnout and breaks you. But intervention and recovery is how you differentiate resilience from burnout. And having our children has made us better as a couple and as people. Challenging, but the best form of delayed gratification in the world, like I said, and wouldn't trade it for the world.
When we talk about with resilience, now moving forward to what it is that you teach, and what is it that you want people to get out of those classes when you go and you teach about resilience and handling stress? What is it? What are the most important things you want to teach?
Great question. Thank you. So I've taught anywhere from 5-minute quick in-doc briefs, which I know you talked earlier about. It'd be great if programs amplified this kind of knowledge more, and very lucky at Naval Hospital Guam. When I took over that program, it had probably 25 members or so. We created some new initiatives. I did some leadership trainings of our board of directors. I did some things called stress assessments, which were, this relates to our first conversation, by the way. So you had talked about how at your command, you had the force protection initiative of assessing stress and then briefing leadership on it. But unfortunately, confidentiality was not always maintained, and it became people not wanting to speak up, which you see quite a bit. Just to compound that stigma of talking about your problems presents a risk. And I mean, again, I have crazy thoughts that come into my head all the time. There are times, no matter how resilient one is, that they're going to be struggling. And talking about that does not mean that they are a liability. That is a strength. That is an opportunity for support. That's an opportunity for collective growth. So you can connect with the people that you work with or that you live with to support one another. And you don't need to love everyone you work with. I mean, even in my extended family, I don't like everybody, but I do love them. I do respect them. And you don't need to like everyone you work with, but you can respect them as human beings. You do have a mission together to accomplish, and you need a team to do that. You can't be individuals. So remembering these things about collective support, perceived support, can be quite beneficial. And so the stress assessments we did, confidentiality was my number one concern. And I would break up a unit into sometimes like the officers and the enlisted, or if I knew there were certain problems, we'd break up groups so people could speak openly, and I could get general, vague concepts that could then be talked to as a group for opportunities for improvement. Without names, it was confidential, but you would see things, basically two takeaways would come from it. These are uncontrollable stressors. So how can we find a way to cope collectively? Or things like your schedule in the ICU is much different than the ER or L&D. Why is that? So sometimes changing the schedule made sense, or explaining the why. That is, you see this in organizations all the time. We implement these processes, but we don't explain why. We don't give a heads up to the people involved. So then uncertainty or misunderstandings leads to unnecessary stress. So these stress assessments got recognized as a best practice throughout the COS program. We grew to over 100 individuals because of a lot of our training systems. And this is a long-winded start to me answering your actual question of organizationally, we made something to where people found value in the knowledge that we were passing because of the encouragement of applying that knowledge in your life. So again, like we talked about earlier today, knowledge means nothing. If you have all the knowledge in the world, it doesn't mean anything if you're not applying it. Wisdom is applied knowledge. Agency is imperative for actual intervention and optimization. So it doesn't matter what you know, it matters what you do. Of course, you have to know what to do correctly and where to aim your efforts. So that knowledge is crucial. But if you only have the knowledge without the agency, you're not going to be accomplishing much. So what I try to pass based on the amount of time I have, I've done anywhere from 5-minute classes, like I said, all the way to week-long classes, 8 hours a day for individuals that are joining our leadership team and everything in between. I like to, when I have time, start off with stress management. Again, as we talked about, stress is inevitable. And if you are reacting to the stressors in your life, we talked about awareness being paramount, delineating stressors versus stress, controllables, uncontrollables, problem solving versus coping strategies. I like to teach stress management systems like I concisely just described, because we need to change from reacting to effectively responding so we can manage inevitable challenge in our life. So effective management of stress is what I like to teach first to encourage recovery. But my favorite thing to talk about and write about on Substack is then intentional stress, or training the skill that is resilience, causing deliberate discomfort in a manageable way for a limited amount of time in various domains: the physical domain, the mental or emotional domain, the social domain, based on whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or talking in public, which was my biggest fear growing up. I do it all the time now. I love talking in public, particularly about things I'm passionate about, like we're doing today. But I almost fainted in front of my class when I was at junior high. All my friends were in front of me. I wasn't prepared for a presentation. Almost fainted. My teacher made me sit down. Very, very embarrassing moment. And I didn't like talking in public through grad school. For the most part, it changed during grad school. But embracing that fear and training the skill that is resilience, the more that I approached it with intention and preparation, the easier it got. And that is true of any skill, including spiritual skills, including knowing your values and applying them, making sure your actions are in alignment, which is why I love talking about self-reflection. We tend to do a lot of things that even subconsciously, even without thinking about it, may not align with our values and priorities. And that inherently will cause internal conflict and undue stress that will impact your ability to sleep well at night, your ability to be proud of who you are or have the effective perspective on life. So I like to now answer your question concisely. First, teach stress management to effectively manage and recover from stress. But again, prevention is way more effective than intervention. Early intervention is better than treatment when you get to a point of decreased function. So intervention to recover, but prevention, that is resilience training. So the more that you can effectively cause stress to develop plasticity in your mind and body to respond effectively to inevitable hardship in your life, the more you're prepared for, unfortunately, what is coming in different ways.
And I think it's interesting because I've come to that conclusion through, not necessarily through the through like a how do I say it? The approach, it feels very what do you call it? Like teacher, like just a life teacher type of way of going at it. I have come to the same conclusion through therapy. So like the way that you're describing it is more of like the military way, but it's still the same thing. It's just a different way of explaining it, but it's essentially the same conclusion that the best thing to do when it comes to growth is, what's the thing you're afraid of? And let's start at a bite-sized version of that. Let's they call it beating the dragon that is small enough for you to beat, right? Like the smallest dragon you can beat. Start there, and then work your way up. And that's been the same thing for me. Is once I started looking at the things that I was afraid of and walking towards them, more light illuminates that thing. And then I realized that actually I was imagining a lot of this, like of how large it actually was. And certainly there were things that I experienced that were very scary and very painful. And yes, some things hurt more than I thought, but I realized that I was more resilient than I believed I was. So it's not so much that they weren't difficult, or that actually when I went towards them, it was fine. I went towards them. It was really scary. It was really difficult, but I found out that I actually had more in me than I thought I did. And that's that, learning that part of like, oh, I'm okay, right, was what gave me the motivation and the confidence to keep moving towards that discomfort, to keep moving towards the things that make me afraid. It's the things that make you afraid that that offer you like the biggest lessons in your life, like what it is you still need to grow, where it is that you still need to grow. That's in that direction. That's in the direction that's most scary, because you're not going to learn it where everything's lit up. You have this little circle within you that okay, this area is good. But once you go and you explore the darker regions that you don't have any light in, and you start bringing your own torch, you start realizing like, oh wow, like there's so much more I don't know, and that's worth the scariness of it.
Absolutely. And you're talking about dealing with fears, and professional intervention for fears and phobias is exposure therapy. It's just progressive overload and exercise physiology principle of starting somewhere very manageable. If you're scared of spiders, let's look at some pictures of spiders. Now let's go to a museum that has spiders in an enclosed case. Now let's go somewhere in a room where it's crawling on the floor 10 yards away from you, and building up to a point that makes sense to help you manage or potentially even overcome a fear. So progressive overload is just manageable start to a stressor, and then increasing that stressor once you become comfortable at that manageable level of slight discomfort. And then once you get comfortable, make yourself a little bit more uncomfortable, add more stressors. So in the strength realm, that could be increasing weight, increasing reps, decreasing break time, changing the environment to make it more stressful. It's cool how, again, exercise is a vehicle for resilience training. That's something I write about quite a bit, because the overlap. The mind, mental health influences physical health, and physical health influences mental health. And these concepts overlap quite a bit, even though, again, we don't always translate them well in our lives because of experience, perceived support, or strategies that are in place. So that question that I had growing up of why are some people more resilient than others? I didn't say it like that, but why do some people respond effectively and recover from stress, which is my definition of resilience? Why are some people better with stress than others? And it's funny, stoic, the adjective, like the connotation sometimes is the absence of emotion. But stoicism, the philosophy, which centuries ago, they were talking about emotional intelligence. They were talking about, no, it is not suppression and absence of emotion. It's understanding and responding effectively to emotion. And I love Stoic philosophy. I love many forms of philosophy. I love evolved systems of medicine and concepts that some of them are derived from some previous philosophers like Socrates. I just read an amazing book by Donald Robertson, How to Think Like Socrates, and going into that history and the detail that he always does in his books, and talking about this amazing thinker that was just questioning assumptions right and left, not only in others, but in himself, to try and figure out the world. He figured out the value of uncertainty. It's true wisdom before anyone else, like where people thought wise was being an expert. But even experts don't know everything. There are limitations that we have, and the more that we think we do know, the more we can pigeonhole ourselves and limiting our actual performance. So again, that question that I had, the answer is it's a skill. And that skill sometimes is forged, unfortunately, through tough childhoods, through uncontrollable adversity that thankfully some people make it through, some don't. Some are compromised by it, but those that are able to persist through uncontrollable adversity sometimes are more resilient individuals. So prior experience absolutely can. Perceived support or objective support systems promote resilience, and then develop strategies from knowledge that is applied to grow the skill that is resilience. There's your answer. That is why some people are more resilient than others, through training, through experience, and through support systems. One, two, or all three of those ideally enhance support. So what are the controllables within that knowledge that we can apply to our lives right now? So I love writing about intentional stress challenges, thinking about any and every domain, and then using. So I come up with a specific challenge. Coming back to exercise physiology, there's something called the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. If you want to get better at lifting weights, don't go for a run around the block. You're not going to get better at lifting weights. If you want to get better at lifting weights, lift weights. So specifically cause stress in the area that you want to improve. And then progressive overload. Start somewhere manageable. Don't start with, I want to be able to deadlift 300 pounds. I've never deadlifted in my life, but let's throw 300 pounds on the bar and rip. You're going to rip all right. But it's not even that bar.
Not in the way you thought.
So you want to start somewhere manageable and then progressively overload. Specifically, get into that domain, into that arena every day with focus, intention, and consistency, and then achieve eventually, and then grow, and then add more stress, add more stressors so you can manage it effectively and recover from it. And I always forget the guy's name, but back in the 70s, a guy came up with the stages of skill development, or stages of competence. We start off subconsciously incompetent. You don't even know what you're not good at because you're not reflecting on it. So self-reflection, again, imperative. Awareness is imperative. You can't intervene and improve on something you don't know about. So we start off unaware, ignorant, subconsciously incompetent. My goal when I do these presentations is to encourage conscious incompetence. Here's an area of opportunity in my life that I'd like to work on. There are countless ones. So again, don't take everything, but find something that makes sense to you that could offer value. I am consciously incompetent here. I'd like to start working in this realm. Now, over time, we're going to try to work to, when I am fully present and focused on this activity, I have become consciously competent. That takes time. But now when I'm in the arena, when I am focusing on this skill, I'm pretty good at it. Now, for a long time, keep doing it. Keep using progressive overload. Keep showing up. Eventually, with enough time, enough dedication and effort, you're going to reach subconscious competence, mastery, muscle memory. You don't have to think about it, and you do it correctly. There is no perfection, but the more you do anything, the better you get at it. And I love that concept for all skills. And then again, what I am passionate about is the skill of resilience. I love to teach about physical fitness. I love to teach about all these things. And I talk about the benefits of potentially cold exposure or deliberate heat exposure or intermittent fasting or fasting from your devices, or all of these different realms that you can challenge yourself in. There are physical benefits. There are reported evidence-based benefits from them. Great. Those are byproducts. The skill that we are truly trying to train is mastery of ourselves, mastery of our urges. We're trying to train the skill of resilience. Everything else is just added benefit. Great, but you show up for resilience training and then you think about those skills and then apply them across domains. You optimize your life everywhere.
I like that. And speaking of the physical part of it, you mentioned being a part of the mixed martial arts community and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Where did that all start?
Started in Guam. So it started when we had our first child on the way. I've always been an athlete. I've enjoyed almost every sport you can imagine. My dad was a collegiate wrestler. So he actually would train people and I'd be their dummy and get beat up by them. But I would love wrestling with good wrestlers. I would hold my own. I had great endurance. I was tough. So I could give people a challenge, but ultimately they would beat me. The good wrestlers would. But I always enjoyed it. But basketball is my favorite sport. Same season, never wrestled. And then ironically, combat sports is my favorite thing now. Maybe my sons will wrestle one day and I can get into that realm other than my experience through friends. That would be fun, but whatever they want to do, I will support. Coming back to me, I was 30 years old. We're in Guam, expecting our first child. And in Guam, martial arts is a part of the culture. It's very prevalent. Small island. The island of Guam is smaller than the base of Camp Lejeune, my first duty station, which is a wild experience. But many gyms, amazing people, amazing culture, not only in general, but mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I tested out a few gyms and ended up at one in particular. It was at a house in a backyard that looked like a prison yard, but they had a cage, and showed up and just loved the team, loved the culture and the interactions that they had, even though they beat my butt the first few days. They were in the process of transitioning to a pretty big facility, and ended up a lot of these guys, including the owner of that gym, became close friends of mine, still in contact with JJ every day, one of my closest friends. And it's incredible to think that I started training just because I wanted to better be able to protect my family with my hands if I had to. Don't get me wrong, I train in weapons, but and I love mixed martial arts. I love striking-based martial arts, but you're escalating force when you consider hitting another individual, when you consider withdrawing a firearm or a knife. Those are considerations that you need when you experience asocial violence or life-threatening situations. Absolutely be prepared for that. But most of the time, social violence or ego-based arguments or people trying to front or whatever you want to call it, asocial violence, where people mean to do you harm that could threaten your life or another. You need to be prepared to escalate force with a deadly weapon or in some way, shape, or form. Most forms of potential violence are social. So this is ego-based. These are arguments. These are people trying to front. But the best form of self-defense, which I've coincidentally learned through learning combat sports, is avoidance. It's situation awareness. It's threat identification. It's confidence in how we control our posture and making sure potential threats see that we see them. So predators want to find prey. We live in a world where most people are looking down. Most people are bottled up and are easy targets. No, if you're a hard target, if you have good situation awareness, if you can identify threats before they are right in front of you, you're probably going to deter them a lot of times, and they're going to look for another target. Don't get me wrong, it may still need intervention on your behalf, but deterrence can happen before the argument even starts. But once the argument starts, if you are insecure, if you are untrained, you are going to experience that stress response, that fight, flight, or freeze response. And again, if we are emotional, we are not going to respond accordingly. We're going to react probably in an irrational way. The more trained you are, the more confident you are in your voice, in your posture, in your ability to know that you don't need to, whether you have an ego or you don't need to fight in the streets. There's no good things that come from fighting in the streets, but being able to use your hands, being able to protect yourself and others. That there are many martial arts out there. I've become quite biased. I love jujitsu. I think conceptually it applies to the largest ranges of ages and abilities. I think as I've become a coach, I love teaching concepts over specific techniques when it comes to our intro class. So don't get me wrong, you can't take a self-defense seminar that I offer for 2 hours and be good to go. It takes, like any other skill development we talked about earlier, the hierarchy, it takes time to become proficient. But you train for a while, you become a harder target. Again, you develop a little bit more confidence in yourself. You develop the ability to be harder to actually physically move or hurt. And the more you can delay time in an altercation, the more opportunity you have for help and intervention. So I started training. My why was to be able to protect my family a little bit better. But I fell in love both with MMA and now primarily Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because it offers, like we talk about, once you know the way, you see it in all things, the lessons that you can learn on the mat. We talk about becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. It is not very comfortable to have someone who is much bigger and stronger than you on top of you with the intent of making you tap to pressure, suffocate, strangle, manipulate one of your joints to a painful point of, even in training, we very much encourage safety. No one's breaking limbs in our gym, thankfully, but it's a risk. And of course, when you compete, that happens. But being able to maintain ration despite someone trying to cause you physical pain, that is stress inducing. Mm-hmm. And the more comfortable you can get with that, man, most other things don't feel that hard in life. Again, the concept of intentional stress, you intentionally cause yourself significant discomfort from time to time in a way that you can manage. Inevitably, most other things feel easy. And I love resilience training when you can manage it as stress management too, because I go to the gym and I train. Inevitably, I'm encouraging the stress response in my body. I'm doing something I enjoy. But even in the beginning, I'm getting the stress response up. When training's over, the stress response happens, it goes down. Parasympathetic nervous system slows everything down. The brain cannot differentiate behind the stressors that cause the stress or why it is slowing down. So if you have financial issues or job issues in your life, or even interpersonal relationship issues, experiencing stress in a different domain and then recovering from that is going to help you recover from emotional to rational in that other domain. So you can think about things from a more realistic perspective on what is possible to cause improvements, to talk about and utilize some of the concepts that we've done before. No one operates very well when they are compromised mentally because of our limbic system being activated, because of cortisol flooding our body. And unfortunately, we are not very good at recovering from a lot of today's stressors. We tend to ruminate. We tend to let things stew and continue to impact us because of negative thinking patterns, because of our perceptions of them, because of our insistence on thinking about stressors rather than our perspective and our response to them. I'm being long-winded like I tend to be here, but
that's okay.
The mats, the gym, I love physical training, fitness training, but I love martial arts training even more. We have training partners. It becomes a social and a collective opportunity for growth. It's a problem solving outside of yourself, which is just more complicated in a new way. My why, again, was self-defense for my family, but it's still my why. It's still how I coach foundationally. But I do compete. I do the sport. I do enjoy the rule sets and going into that domain. But at the end of the day, the reason I train continues to be being the best version of myself to protect and provide for my family and be the best man that I can be. And the fact that I am now coaching and trying to transcend the lessons that I have, this is where like I want to give respect to you, because a lot of people, I mean, as we know, you get out of the military, you have a mission in the military, you're part of a team, and a mission is provided to you. And there is resilience in that. And people leave the military, and don't get me wrong, there are many cool personal pursuits that you can do, and there's dopamine activating activities that are a lot of fun. But when we talk about selfish and selflessness, when you can find opportunities for things that you're passionate about, to transcend that to others, to impact others, there's a new mission. I'm still in the military, obviously. You're post-military, but we have overlapping passions, and there's how you continue on. There's how you continue to thrive post-service, which a lot of people struggle with. But finding that mission that benefits you and others, man, there's so much beauty in that. But most importantly, again, selfishly, there's resilience in that. And you see people thriving post-military career or post anything, post mixed martial arts. You see people get out of the fight game and fall apart. They don't have that next fight. They don't have that mission. They don't have that, unfortunately, in this case, external validation as a fighter. They're now post-career. So who are they? What is your identity? And identities, in my opinion, should not be, and I hate the word should, by the way, so when I use it, I catch myself, but there are cases where it's okay. Don't have one sole identity. Yes, I'm a father first, I'm a husband, I'm a man, but I'm also a jiu-jitsu coach and practitioner. I'm a fitness enthusiast. I am many things that my identity is tied to. So my priorities, my values are underlying it, but I'm many things. I'm passionate about many things. I'm a continuous learner. I'm a reader. I'm a writer. You name it, whatever you love and benefits you, find a way to not only grow yourself there, but once you get to a point of competence that you can teach it, lifelong mission, lifelong opportunity. And there's a cool way to think about how to live to our fullest. So props to you, brother, for finding.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I think two big things I would like to talk about that you just talked about that I thought was huge. First of all, the MMA community, I was a part of that for a few years. And let me tell you that was the most humbling experience on top of the whole thing going through boot camp. And yes, you get broken down in Marine Corps boot camp and rebuilt. And yes, that did impact me, but also the MMA community brings you right back down to earth, because sometimes you need it. It's good to build your confidence, but there's a point where there's a what's the word? Overconfidence is also a bad thing, right? There's everything in moderation. And what had happened for me was I became a Marine, and suddenly I thought I was the best at everything, because in the Marine Corps, it's, from the moment you're a recruit, you're told, everything you do, you will be the best at. And so that's like the thing that's in your head. And I had that as a young 19, 20-year-old going into the MMA community, learning about, oh, well, I know how to fight because I'm a Marine. I'm the best. I'm the best of the best, right? And so when I stepped foot into that MMA gym, and if you have a good community, like a loving community that cares about each other, you'll walk into this community and they'll humble you, but they'll reach their hand out to you and go, hey, let me show you this. And that's what I loved about that community, is just that it first of all, it humbled me. It made me realize that I have much more to learn, and that in this space, right, I might be a great rifleman. I might be good at shooting. I might be good at all that. But in this space, you aren't. And we're always students. And that's what I took from that environment, was that you're always a student. And so that was my experience in MMA, and I loved it. I loved being a part. I was like, man, like giving back. And I eventually became like a conditioning coach, because that's what I could offer. I am not an expert in boxing. I'm not an expert in martial arts, but I do have pretty good knowledge about fitness, right? And so I can show you some things that were really helpful that I learned in the military. And so that's what I could bring here, right? So it wasn't this idea of like, I could fight anybody. You know what I did? My first day when I went in there, when we talk about ego, I walked in and I was like, give me the biggest guy. I want to fight the biggest guy here. And they gave me that. I got my wish. And so I got paired with this dude that was maybe 230 30 pounds, something like that. He was a big man. And so he was, I didn't know this, by the way. He was a Muay Thai fighter, and he was also a purple belt in judo, and didn't know this. So I thought, okay, this guy is heavier than me. So what do I need to do? I need to run circles around this dude and get him tired. And so that's what I did. I circled around him over and over again. He couldn't hit me. And I was like, this is going to be pretty simple once he gets tired. And so then he slowly, with his knowledge, because he's just way more knowledgeable in this space than I am, he slowly, I didn't notice it, but he's slowly walking me to the wall. And so I'm not realizing this because I'm focused on, I'm just going to keep darting back and forth, right, until this guy gets tired and I can hit him. And I start getting enclosed. And once I realize I'm enclosed, he goes for my legs. I'm thinking, okay, he's going to do a double leg. He's going to just take me down. So I'm trying to widen my stance, and not knowing he knows judo, he's actually setting me up for a hip throw. And so he then, I feel his shift, the weight shift very quickly. And by the time I realize what's happening, I'm in the air. And he throws me. And next thing I know, he lands right on top of me. And that was a moment of, you're not in control here.
Yep.
And that was a moment that was something I needed to be checked, because in that moment I thought that I was better than everyone in there. And I got shown really quick that that's not the case. And no shame in that, but let me show you something, brother. That's what I learned there. And I learned to be humble. And that was one thing. The second thing that you said was, when we get out of the military community, what inspired this for me is that a lot of times we get out and we go, well, what am I now? You said that earlier. What am I now? And that was a question I asked myself. And so I would like to invite you too, by the way, because I'm working on something. This is going to be something down the road, but I see it being part of my life at some point, which is I would love to create an event, a military event, like a ball, so to speak, a military ball, something that we hold near and dear to our hearts in the Marine Corps. I would love to have a space for veterans to get together in an event such as a ball, where we can get back together with each other and connect. Because at the end of the day, connection is what really what we're looking for. And so we lose it when we get out. We feel we lose it, but that's not true. That's just in our heads, because we don't see each other anymore. And so I would love to, in the future, I've already done one experiment with it. Last November for the birthday, I tested it out, and I was like, I want to see how many people I can bring here. And I invited as many people as I could, and we got about 30 people together. And I mean, it was the energy in that room, if I could describe it to you, was like something that I've never experienced before. It was just this feeling of longing, this feeling of like, I've missed this feeling of I'm so happy that you invited me. Just the consideration that I was a part of this, just the feeling of I'm a part of something again.
Yeah.
That is what I would love to recreate. And for veterans as they get out, hopefully to help them transition, and that you don't have to lose this completely when you get out. And so hopefully at some point we can do this at a bigger scale, but you're always invited, of course. And hopefully we can do that and spread that throughout the military community.
Beautiful. Yeah, talking about the martial arts experience, funny. I had the same mindset. I went in to training very athletic. So before I trained with that MMA team, where I knew I wasn't going to be great when I first started sparring with those guys, I went to a standard jiu-jitsu gym where there were white belts there who were not very impressive looking when it comes to athletics. And so we're doing the warm-ups, and I'm one of the best athletes in the room easily. And I think that's going to translate well to my performance when we start sparring. But all things being equal, give me skill over athleticism, size, or strength any day. So if you are trained against an untrained individual, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it's not going to go well for that other individual. And your strategy against that bigger individual, if he weren't trained, that's not a terrible strategy, trying to wear people out. I mean, fatigue makes cowards of us all. If you're exhausted, you're not going to be thinking rationally. You're not going to be able to move your body the way you want to. So trying to fatigue people is a great concept. But if you are skilled, you know how to impart a governor on yourself. So you are never fatigued, particularly if people can't make you that way. What I love doing to individuals who come into our gym now, even if they want to go with the biggest guy, the most athletic guy, to test themselves, now you got to prove yourself first. You're going with my 130-pound female purple belt. They don't know she's a purple belt because when they come into some of these classes, it's no-gi. But cute little girl, she's going to beat your butt. Unless you are highly trained, she is so skilled. She is so technical. She's also an MMA fighter, and she grew up doing kickboxing and striking martial arts. But she is a very technical grappler. I'm sorry, and she is it is so much fun to watch her. Of course, the technical dominance is fun to watch, but when she humbles men, it warms my heart because it gives you a new sense of reality. There is no turning red in winning fights against a trained individual. A lot of people think that their ego or their ability to intimidate is going to be effective, and it will against an untrained individual. Because if you can cause the fight, flight, or fear response in another, then yeah, it's going to be the biggest growl can win, like in the animal kingdom. But if you're trained and you're ready to go, that's not going to be effective. If anything, that's going to cause exhaustion. So it's very fun to watch the other side of that, where there is no size or strength excuse. And as a smaller individual, as a female, and you're an athletic male, and she has you breathing like you just got done running a marathon in 3 minutes after she's tapped you 3 times. So it's very fun to watch that, because you're right, it humbles you. And I'm a big believer in martial arts for all individuals for that reason. So we talk about like anti-bullying programs. I mean, even me, I wasn't a bully growing up, but I had a chip on my shoulder. I was a smaller guy. I was athletic. I was tough. I got in fights that I needed to get into to prove it to others that I could hold my own. Unnecessary risk inherently involved, injuries not needed. Thankfully, my life is not significantly altered from me hurting someone else too significantly, or them hurting me significantly over what? Over ego. But when you train, you get to express that inner kind of primal nature that we all have to test ourselves. But the beginner's mindset that you alluded to is more important. So don't get me wrong, training is very beneficial. It's good to have an ego. They say leave it at the door. I say don't leave it fully at the door, but shift it from a competitive mindset with your training partners, which are your most important assets, to being a learner. So you be a good training partner. Be safe, keep others safe, particularly if you're an amateur. It's not about winning. If you're trying to win in training, you're limiting your growth. Don't get me wrong. If you're in training camp before a competition, we can get some live hard rounds in, even as an amateur. And of course, as you get better and better, there's situations where we're going to go hard. But when you're rolling as a beginner, or even as a brown belt, based on who I'm rolling against or what I'm doing, what my goals are that day, I'm trying to learn. I'm not trying to win. And skill differential and how we approach life. You can be a beginner as an expert, keeping your mind open, being willing to take on new lessons, even from people less experienced from you. There's always opportunities to learn in any interaction. It doesn't mean you have to accept all knowledge and absorb it, like I said, the Bruce Lee quote, but there are opportunities to get better all the time. And the vehicle that are martial arts, I love, again, for resilience in life. And that humility, that becoming humbled initially, is beneficial for all of us. And for those that are already humble and want to improve and build confidence, without question, there's opportunity there. Any type of person can potentially benefit from martial arts if they want to. If they don't want to, they shouldn't do it. But it is a great opportunity if you have that itch. Don't let fear of what it is deter you from doing so. Don't get me wrong. There are bad apples everywhere. There are bad gyms. There are bad coaches. There are bad cultures. I actually just wrote a piece on Substack about an intentional challenge to train in jiu-jitsu. And I talk about, throughout my progressive challenge series, assessing gyms and their culture and guidelines to determine what may be a good fit for you based on your training goals and aspirations for training. But yeah, culture, safety, relationships are just as, if not more important than the training itself. Because if you're showing up and getting beat up and getting treated poorly, no, we're not trained to be world champions, most of us. We're training to improve ourselves, and that's not the domain to do it in if somebody's acting that way. But yeah, I love it. It's a part of my life, and it will be forever.
It's definitely a community of people that want to keep improving, and who doesn't want to be around that? I did want to ask you if you had anything that you wanted to share with our audience. I think we're coming up a little bit on our time here. So is there anything you'd like to share with the audience that we haven't talked about already?
We have talked about it all already. I mean, my biggest takeaway is manage your stress. You can't do that without awareness. So stress management 101, awareness. Differentiate your stress from your stressors. Find controllables within each. For the uncontrollables, which are mostly our stressors, other than acceptance or avoidance, find ways to cope. For the controllables, find ways to solve issues in the short, mid, and long term. Lean on your support systems, both perceived and objective, at your family and friend level. And then if and when needed, the endless resources that we have, both in the military and civilian sector. There are endless. And if you're not sure of them, reach out to me. So share my email after this in the podcast. If it's not obvious, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff. So reach out to me. There are entities that care about you. You are never alone. We live in a time with social media where it's ironic that many people are struggling and feel isolated when we are more connected figuratively than ever. Social media followers and likes are not legitimate connections. Conversations are better in person than they are online. But don't get me wrong, that's an entity where you can connect. There are beautiful communities out there, like on Substack, where engagement and collective support is real in the digital space. That being said, use your support systems, assess your stress, use strategies to effectively manage and eventually recover from it. But my main takeaway, always, that I'm most passionate about, is cause some discomfort. Train that muscle that is resilience. Find a domain that you want to improve in. And if you can't think of one, again, reach out to me. I have countless ones, and I'm developing plenty more. There are always ways that we can test ourselves at a manageable level for a brief period of time, to practice the strategies that we may have with intentional breathing, reframing, whatever it may be, to endure during that short-term stressor that we're causing, and then recover from it. The brain doesn't differentiate whether you controlled it or not. Plasticity, neuroplasticity is possible because of that said principle, and then progressively overload that baby once you get comfortable. Don't stay comfortable. Complacency kills. Find a way to make yourself uncomfortable every day and recover from it. That is self-care. That is recovery. That is prevention. That is resilience.
There are 3 questions I'd like to ask that I ask every guest before we end our conversations. First of all, where can we support you? Where can we follow you? Where can we find your work?
Substack. Yeah, Resilient Mental State. That's my Substack. I channel everything on other platforms there. I started writing a little over a year ago, and went 8 months just posting once a week, and then decided to start engaging more. And it's pretty cool. Again, the engagement, the quality connections that you make with people, the other writers and readers. I'm as much of a reader on that platform as I am a writer, but that's the location to primarily find me, but also you can share my email.
Awesome. Have you discovered purpose? And if you haven't, what do you think it might be?
So I have multiple answers to that question. One, I wrote an intentional stress challenge called Write Your Eulogy. So we talked about contemplation of death. Writing your eulogy is another extreme version of contemplating your own personal death. But the intent is to think about, if you were to pass away tomorrow or at the end of your life, how would you want others to remember you? And this is a form of self-reflection that you can start thinking about your values, your priorities, or the achievements you want to make. I always argue that, don't get me wrong, look to achieve things. But objective achievements, in my opinion, are not as significant as internal character, demonstration of your values through your actions. So how do you want to be remembered? And dial that down to maybe one sentence. So when I talk about like purpose, what I put in that Write Your Eulogy post was, the purpose of life is to become comfortable with death. And that's deep and sounds dark and morbid until we start elaborating on that, which is why I always make sure I talk about that in long form rather than just like post that quote and leave it like, whoa, no, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
But if you are comfortable with your death, that means you've gotten to a point of character and demonstration of your values, understanding of the uncertainty and controllables that you have in your life, where you are living every day to your fullest. You're at a point of contentment in your life where you know you've done the best that you can with what you've had. You are continuously to try and deliver, and you have found a way to love fate. I believe in free will. I believe that we have control over the interpretations of our thoughts and our subsequent actions, but I know a lot of things are outside of our control. And rather than try to fight those things, fight that uncertainty, I'm going to focus on me. I'm going to do me and do it to the best of my abilities. So my purpose is, in my eulogy, I say he was a good father, husband, and man. So simple as that. There's so many other things that I love, but they don't make the cut. They all filter into that.
If you could speak to your childhood self, what would you say?
That's a great question. Let me sit on that for a second. Keep showing up, keep going. You don't know everything. You actually don't know anything, and you never will. Stay the course and listen to your heart. Because I know as a kid, I've always been a good guy, but I was listening to my underdeveloped mind and doing a lot of negative thinking patterns or acting on a lot of thought interpretations that were more from emotion and feelings than they were from ration. We don't develop our brains until it's 25, 26, I think is about the age that the prefrontal cortex forms. So listen to your heart and know that time is necessary to fully find yourself, to find what you're looking for. It's coming. Don't rush the process. Love the process. Show up every day and do the best you can.
Lieutenant Commander Kyle Shepard, thank you so much for joining us and for having this conversation. It takes a lot of courage, as we talked about, to be vulnerable. And thank you for leading the way. And we'll be in contact soon.
I appreciate you, brother. Been a pleasure.
Take care.